Good morning. And thank you so much for your patience. The Dalai Lama once told me that most things in your life come to you to teach you patience and compassion. So consider this your first teaching of the morning. I'm Mickey Lemley, and I have the great honor and privilege of serving as chairman of the board of the Tibet Fund. The Tibet Fund has for 28 years looked after issues of cultural preservation and humanitarian efforts in the Tibetan community, both in exile and inside Tibet. And we're thrilled to be able to organize this event this morning. And it promises to be quite interesting, I think. We're going to look at what has happened to the Tibetan culture in exile and how it has affected the host countries where we're lucky enough to have Tibetans amongst us and what they have taught us over the years. I have the privilege of introducing my friend Pico Iyer, who will be moderating the dialogue today. Pico is an extraordinary writer. He's written 9 books. The first one, his first book was called Video Nights in Kathmandu and was a bestseller. His 9th book, the most recent one, is called The Open Road, Global Travels with the 14th Dalai Lama. Pico was born in England, in Oxford, of Indian parents. He grew up in California, England. He lives now in Japan and Santa Barbara. He's a real citizen of the world. He got a King's Scholarship to attend Eton in England, and then went on to Oxford, where he did a double major, and when he graduated, he was acknowledged as having the highest marks in the university, which some of us feel was just showing off. After that, he went to Harvard, where he got his second master's degree in literature and writing, and taught there for 2 years before leaving to write for Time magazine. And that's when I first met Pico. It was in a hot tub at Esalen, and we were attending a week-long session with Joseph Campbell, and he was chatting with me about he was covering it for Time. And he was chatting with me about the workshop, and I said, you know, when I tell my friends in New York that I'm going to Esalen to hang out with an 80-year-old man and listen to myths and stories all day, they kind of roll their eyes and say, uh-huh. And that was the quote that Pico put in his article in Time magazine, and we've been friends ever since. His interest in the Dalai Lama started actually when he was 2 years old. One of his earliest memories was listening to the BBC broadcasts about the young Dalai Lama trying to escape from Tibet and finally getting into India. And his father, who was a Gandhi expert, was so moved about the Dalai Lama coming into India that within a year of his coming into exile, he went to India to meet him, and he told the Dalai Lama about his then 3-year-old son's interest. And the Dalai Lama went and got a picture of himself at age 3 to give to Pico's father, to give to Pico, which he cherished for years. He spent 34 years covering the Dalai, having a conversation with the Dalai Lama, which has gone into his book, and I highly recommend it. This symposium.
What did it? Old friend. Thank you. Oh.
Well, thank you so much, Mickey, for your introduction, and thank you all for coming out on this spring morning that so many of us have been waiting for such a long time. And I think you all know how deeply honored and just delighted we are to have in our company really two of the globe's greatest champions of conscience, of dialogue, of peace, and I think most important, of really rigorous practical work for change in the very, very real world. All of you know that His Holiness won the Nobel Prize for Peace 20 years ago in 1989, and among many, many other awards was given the Congressional Gold Medal 2.5 years ago. And I think all of you know that for decades he has really been a spiritual friend and counselor to the planet, whom I think just about everybody looks to for sustenance and for inspiration, regardless of her race or her religion. For 50 years, he's been tirelessly protecting the people of Tibet, bringing the global world into Tibet, bringing Tibet into the global world. But I think those of us who are lucky enough to spend time with him feel that one of the great things he offers all of us is his humanness and the way he reflects back to us our human potential. When he goes to the White House, he will shake the hand of every last waiter and bodyguard, as well as of our president, really just to show that we're all the same. When he has a free day on his schedule, he won't spend it cultivating power brokers or talking to the media. He'll go to a small school because he knows that those children are the ones who are practically constructing our future of 20, 30 years from now. I've been lucky enough, as I think you heard, to know His Holiness for 35 years, since I was a teenager myself. And when I travel across Japan with him, as I do every year, I'm constantly amazed at how just seeing how His Holiness moves through the world sheds light on my life and on things that I could do better. I remember a couple of years ago, we were in Hiroshima, Japan, and we were climbing a steep slope to get to a temple. And as we were doing that, a young woman stepped forwards and she said, "Lama, Dalai Lama, I need to talk to you." And of course, the bodyguards quickly spirited her away. And His Holiness went up to the temple, and we were sitting there quietly for a few minutes. And as we were sitting there, we could hear her shouting outside. And as soon as His Holiness came out of the temple, to my amazement, he called his security to him, and he asked them to bring her right next to him. And he just cupped her face in his hand and looked deeply into her eyes and more or less said, "I'm your friend. You have nothing to worry about. We have much more in common than apart." And of course, it was astonishing to see that, because most of us, when faced with hecklers, run in the opposite direction. But I think beyond that, as with so much he does, it really spoke for the larger things he believes in, which is face-to-face contact, dialogue, looking for common ground. And the last thing I'll say, because we will be speaking about exile today, and this marks the 50th year of His Holiness and many Tibetans' lives in exile, is that recently when I was researching my book on His Holiness, I found that the very first words he delivered when he set foot in exile were, "Now we are free." Again, extraordinary words. To us, it seems he's lost his country, he's lost his immediate contact with his people, he's lost his seeming destiny. But instantly, he's seeing loss as opportunity. He's seeing it from a wider perspective and realizing that in exile, he could do many things that might have been hard to do in old Tibet. He can give women new rights. He can bring science into his monk's curriculum. He can liberate Tibet from its centuries-old isolation. And I think most important, he can bring his people democracy for the first time in their history. One reason why, after 50 years in exile, The Economist, not the most gushing of magazines, calls the Tibetan refugee community far and away the most successful on the planet. All of you know that Mary Robinson was president of Ireland from 1990 to 1997, and immediately after that served as the second ever UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. And as president of her country, the first female president, she really oversaw its transformation, inward and outward. People now think back on the Robinson years, as they're called, as a golden age. And at one point, if you can believe it, she enjoyed 93% popularity ratings. More substantial than that, though, as President of Ireland, she was the first head of state to go to Somalia during its crisis in 1992. She was the first head of state to go to Rwanda after its catastrophe in 1997. And I think she was already beginning to frame this new vision of rights that she took deeper and made much more global once she was at the United Nations, which is to speak for the rights of children, the rights of women, the rights of victims of torture, the rights of victims of racial discrimination, and to remind us that rights are not just something political and civic, but economic and social, that it's not just a matter of freedom of speech and freedom of belief, but freedom from fear and freedom from need. As many of you know, she's been deeply concerned with the Tibetan issue since the days when she was in the Senate of Ireland. She became the first UN High Commissioner to visit Tibet in 1998. And while she was president, I think she showed what to me seems characteristic fearlessness and resolve by meeting His Holiness when he came to Ireland, even though most of the people around her were telling her it was imprudent in terms of her country's trade relations with Beijing. She's now leading Realizing Rights, the Ethical Globalization Initiative. And when you hear those words, and when you remember that His Holiness says he travels around the world to share global ethics, you can see one of the many things that our two inspirations have in common. I think they've always been the champions of the dispossessed, the impoverished, and the voiceless, and have always worked, just as Seamus Heaney so beautifully wrote, to make hope and history rhyme. There are so many things we could talk about with them today, but we thought it would be most useful to focus our discussion and at least to begin with exile and then radiate out from there, because this is the age of the dispossessed person. By some counts, 200 million people in the world live outside their countries. My aim is to be as silent as possible, and I apologize in advance if I ask the questions you wish were not being asked, but as you heard, you have a chance to submit questions of your own. So I will go over there and start the dialogue, but I just want to thank President Robinson and Your Holiness so much for sharing your time with us today. Your Holiness, I know you don't like to dwell on the past because the past is past, but could you tell us how you began thinking when you arrived in India in 1959, knowing you had to reconstruct your culture? What were your priorities, and what were your inspirations, or what precedents did you look to as you began to...
Today? No. Yes. I think in 1956, then not as a refugee, but I think quite high sort of quite high sort of position in the government of People's Republic of China. So came to India as a guest of Indian government. So during that period, I met, of course, Indian leaders, and then many Gandhians, freedom fighters. So then actually, at that time, there is opportunity to remain in India, and a lot of talks also took place. But finally, mainly, Pandit Nehru's sort of advice, and I returned, beginning of 57. So when 59 crisis happened, although I did my best effort, to cool down the situation, but failed. Then when we reached Indian border, firstly, the people who received me at the border, some of my old friends, one Indian official who was posted in Lhasa, and also some some other officials, I already know 1956. So therefore, when I reach border, I feel something like reunion. That's one, I think, consolation. Consolation. Then the immediate task is look after the refugee. After me, several thousand follow. But then our main task is for preservation of Tibetan culture, and the way to preserve our culture with modern education. So we emphasize at most important of modern education. So within 1 year, we established first Tibetan school in Mussoorie. And then also settlement. From that time, our slogan is hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. So at that time, we talk sometimes hoping, within 1 or 2 years, we may return or find some solution. But now, 50 years already take. Now still don't know how long. But we prepared for that. So we take the project, resettlement project in India. That also not necessarily just to northern India, but we, for long run, for long term, the more open space. So that eventually we found South India, mainly in Karnataka state. So now look back, last 50 years, I think preservation of cultural heritage, I think we quite well success. Now today, such a stage, the many Tibetan monks, nuns, and also the ordinary student, you say, go to India and join some of these institutions. So at least several thousand now getting spiritual, Buddhist education, Buddhist philosophy, these things, and also modern education like that. So we feel quite proud. Then also modern education field, I think today, I think the standard of modern education inside Tibet, I think our position is better than inside. So last 50 years, I always say, homeless person, but found new happy home. Indian people, Indian government, and concerned officials, and also I think basically many NGOs, even many government, help. So with that, Tibetan refugee community become, I think, one of the most successful refugee community. I think you have to judge. Perhaps I think Tibetan, I think quite good, I think quite successful. So.
Well, indeed, President Robinson, you've worked with so many exile communities everywhere. What do you see as the common problems and also the common possibilities that they all share?
Well, first of all, Your Holiness, it's a great honor to have this opportunity to speak in public with you. And I was thinking as you spoke, 50 years of exile and the pain of that all the same. In Ireland, we profoundly understand exile because we had patterns of emigration over decades, over centuries. And I was always struck by how important it was to the Irish who left the island to preserve their culture along the lines that you're talking about. And when I was elected President of Ireland, I said, and I underestimated what I was going to do, I said I would put a light in the window of my official residence for all of those who'd had to emigrate from Ireland. And that light took on a life of its own. I had actually meant a candle, but the security people said, no candle. So we got a lamp made and we put it in the window. But what I'm saying is that connection that people want, and what you've done is you've enabled those who are exiled to continue to value and to treasure and to pass on to their children their culture and their heritage. And that's vital. But at the same time, I have been in your beautiful country once in 1998, and I immediately sensed the spirituality, the completely different atmosphere from other parts of China. And that must be very difficult, and I think there is no easy way about it. I also believe that we're beginning to understand the importance of using modern communications to make the connections if people have to leave their country. And African countries are now linking with their diasporas. India is doing the same. Indeed, China is linking with a wider diaspora. And I think this is good because Irish culture benefited greatly from what the Irish family around the world had been doing, and then when they started to come back to Ireland, when it was easier to come back and when Ireland became more prosperous, there was an enrichment. So I think that it does lead to enrichment, and yet nonetheless, exile is loss. Exile is distance from home and from the context you want to be in. And it's really very important that you have created a context in India that enables the best possible substitute, but it is a substitute for living in your own country and in your own context. Your Holiness, when you were talking about those 50 years and hope but plan for the worst, can I ask you, thinking back now, if you knew then in 1959 that 50 years would pass and you would still be out of the country, is there anything you think you would have done differently?
Oh, I don't think. As I mentioned earlier, we planned our struggle. I think the preparation for worst. They even take generations. We must sort of plan accordingly. So at that time, among our own people, some of them, actually my elder brother here. So his view, the Tibetan should settle in northern India. The South India too far, that kind of feeling. But then the majority of our people, our concerned people view, as I mentioned earlier, more open space and where we can extend, and also as a colony. So that means including marriage, then better. So instead of just scattered, spread out like that. So I think we prepare for the worst. I think now become, quite successful. But at that time, I don't know.
So it's wonders whether there is anything specific he would have done differently if he had known that it would take so long.
Actually, now last more than 60 years since I carry the responsibility. Then when I look back, all major decisions in the last 60 years seems become correct. Oh, small things, of course, always happen. When I entered this hall, I thought maybe warmer. So at that time, you see, I felt, now this the thicker because of the shawl, may change. But then I thought, if it's cool or if warm, then I can. Not like your sort of dress. The monks' one advantage is you can easily take off. If you feel too cold yesterday, morning teaching, you see quite cold, so remain like that. So now if you see warm enough, then I can take out easily. So I kept this thicker one, so that's correct. One day in Delhi, so one talk, summer, I thought naturally it's warm. So very thin clothes. In the actual hotel, air conditioned, very cold, very cold. I almost shivering. Such mistake here and there always happen.
I was in. Just as you and I were talking backstage, you were saying that you had some unexpected and interesting moments when you went to Tibet in 1998. I'm interested to hear about them myself because I don't know those.
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever had the opportunity to tell Your Holiness how difficult it was when I was invited by China to visit China during the 50th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1998. And they wanted me to come, and I wanted to go. But I also said, if I go, I want to go to Tibet. No. And I said, yes. And we had a lot of discussion. And quite near the time, I was going to go in September, and we were beginning to plan, but I was still insisting that I wanted to go also to Tibet. And the then Chinese ambassador came to see me in my office in Geneva, and he started to explain, about the visit. And I said, but I want to also go to Tibet, so I'm not agreeing yet, because you haven't given me the green light. And he said, completely out of the context, he said, when you come to Shanghai, you will see a sign in one of the parks. We kept that sign, and it says, no dogs or Chinese allowed. And I looked at him, and I said, as an Irish person, I understand that. There were many signs, no Irish, no Catholics. And he looked at me, and he said, will you send me a history of your people? And there are many histories of my people, so I was very happy. I sent him several books. And 2 weeks later, I got permission to travel to Tibet. And I think it was because I had a background that was not colonial. It was the opposite. And somehow that was enough trust that I could go to Tibet. It was an extraordinarily special visit for me. It was not long enough, but one thing I did that I recall vividly, we went to a school in Lhasa, and I had little copies of the Universal Declaration in your language, in the Tibetan language. And we spoke to teachers, and we handed them these, and they had never heard of the Universal Declaration. And I was very happy to be giving these so that they could use them. And then one of my human rights officers who was with me whispered to me that this was probably against Chinese law. But I was the High Commissioner, so I said, I don't mind. But we had a very, very interesting conversation because they had no idea how to use this. They said, but how do we teach this? And I said, you don't teach so much as talk about it. Just talk about it with the students and see what they think. And that will be a good conversation. And I was back in China as High Commissioner on a number of other occasions, but I never was able to get back to Tibet. But it was always an issue that I raised. There were always human rights issues that I was being given by Amnesty and Human Rights Watch and China Watch. They would give me the human rights situation over the... And it's very unacceptable that the human rights situation in Tibet has been continuing and has not been addressed and not effectively addressed, either from the outside or even more so from within. It's kind of heartbreaking from a human rights point of view.
And it's been getting a
So
lot...
I feel happy. Now here also one spiritist. Anything nowadays, you say anything.
I know.
You speak truthful, honestly, which not go well with official line. Then they simply say spiritist. So seems you also some activities of spiritist.
In my visits to China as UN High Commissioner for Human Rights,
Right.
I found it quite difficult to keep the balance because China signed a memorandum with me and my officials to engage in workshops on human rights issues. They also signed the 2 covenants on international human rights, and they ratified the covenant on economic, social, and cultural rights, not the covenant on civil and political rights. But I never got satisfaction on the actual human rights problem issues, whether it was to do with Falun Gong, whether it was to do with Tibet, whether it was to do with labor dissidents. And so at the end of my visit, I would have a press conference, and I was very straight. I'm a very direct person. I say it as it is. So I gave credit to China for the workshops on addressing the problem of re-education through labor, no due process, police and human rights, courts reform, etc. And I criticized the lack of movement on Tibet. There were Tibetan nuns that were jailed at one stage that I was complaining about, and I raised it in detail and got no satisfaction. And then the international media, particularly the US media, would say, High Commissioner slams China. High Commissioner criticizes China. And the Chinese media would say, High Commissioner praises China. It was difficult.
Your Holiness, as you know, many of us in this country have lost our homes, we've lost our jobs because of the recent economic collapse. And people always look to you. You've seen so much difficulty and challenge and loss in your life, and you remain so confident. How did the rest of us begin to find confidence when our lives are unraveling sometimes around us?
Yes, it is quite serious and very sad. But one thing, you see, I feel those people who just, you see, they think about money, their whole sort of interest only money. So maybe even in dream, just money like that. No? So just such people, I think their whole hope relying on money. So when this global economic crisis happened, I think much more disturbances to such people. Then another kind of people, yes, money is very important. Without money, you can't survive, you can't work. However, the other values, the very sort of pleasant, family, full of love, compassion, or with compassionate companion, or neighbors, or community, perhaps. I think such people, although one side, they also passing through same experience. They reduce the expenses on these things, and sometimes jobless like that. But still, as a person, still I think much happier. because there are other values. So in that, from that viewpoint, sometimes I feel the little difficulties regarding material, I think good to remind there is limitation. Therefore, also total hope or total expectation, just relying on money or matter, and you get sooner or later you get some problem. And many years ago, one time in my visit to Japan, I expressed, at that time, the Japanese economy, you see, very smoothly, very rapidly increasing. At that time, I expressed, so this sort of growth may not be always like that. So anyway, there is limitation. So once you reach a certain level, then no longer much sort of development. And if you too much expectation, or you take for granted this kind of situation, then you will face a lot of problem. So it is better to prepare in mind, there is limitation. So then afterward, after one occasion, then the Japanese economy, little sort of problems started. Then another occasion, my visit there, then my friend, some economist, I think the businessmen, then they appreciate about my sort of view. So like that. That I feel. Otherwise, I don't know. And perhaps, I think, now here, one thing I want to share with you is, the market-oriented economy. Sometimes people say the force of market force looks something beyond human power. But at the same time, the market force itself is human creation. So something human created, but at the same time beyond human control. So that's a little, puzzle. So then one time, I think last year, I asked my Italian friend, who is a businessman, and also have some business work in China also. And I asked him, what is the cause? What was the reality? Then he mentioned the present, one causes of present sort of crisis. He mentioned too much greed. With that, speculation without sort of knowing certain, but just speculation. And not transparent. Hypocrisy. Lies also. He mentioned these are the sources of this problem. Then I thought, now money matter also related with truthful, honesty, transparent. So that related with moral ethics. If you carry economic work or business work, honestly, transparent, realistic, then this kind of things may not happen at big scale. So that I know, but otherwise I don't know. I think the audience maybe know much better. I don't know.
Your Holiness, when I had finished my 5 years as UN High Commissioner and came here to New York, I established a very small initiative with a very fancy name, the Ethical Globalization Initiative. And then we actually realized that that was a bit too pompous. So instead we called it Realizing Rights. And we meant that in two senses. that because of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that every government has accepted, that everybody has a birthright of human rights. So everybody has a birthright.
Birthright. Oh, yes.
Yeah. So everybody should realize they
yes.
have human rights. And then the second meaning of the word realize means to implement, to make it happen. So that those with power should make it happen. But what I'd love to ask you, and I think you've touched on it already, is how would you see an ethical globalization, given that we've had this financial huge crisis because of greed and because of hypocrisy, as you said? How do we get to a more ethical, fairer globalization?
So any human activities, even warfare or anything, is carried with honesty, truthful, open, transparent, then I think trust can develop or maintain. With trust, I think work may go smoothly. That I feel, even religious person, when I give teaching, I simply, truthfully, I never pretend I have some sort of special sort of experience or something like that. So in every field, truthful, honest, that I think very, very important. Even animal, our contact or our relation with animal, dogs or cats, or too small animal, I don't know. I always the curiosity, the mosquitoes and some fly, whether they have the ability to show appreciation of others' kindness. So what level of brain have the ability to appreciate? Dogs and cats, yes, naturally. And I think birds also. Of course, it may take a little bit sort of waste of time, but I have used one story that often I tell. I think some of you, I think, already heard. When I was young, I think teenage, teenage, one small parrot. So one my, a monk sort of tendency, monk official, who also taught me writing Tibetan. So he always feeding that small parrot whenever he come. So the parrot, when that person's even the sound of walk, footsteps, because the parrot is showing something really sort of nice way. And then actually you see feeding, and somewhere with the eyes very nice and something. Then that official is also his finger goes the parrot's head like that. Then I developed some jealousy. I also used to wonder that kind of attitude from that parrot. So, few occasions, because I give some nuts, but you see, the parrot takes nut, never show the friendly attitude. Then eventually, I used one still a small stick, a little punishment. That's the end of our relation.
I've heard about the carrot and stick, but never before the parrot and stick.
So therefore, I believe you see, the truthful, even those animals. In my case, not very sincere. Just I want you see some more reward. revered. I think my sort of the monks or official, I think without that, simply, you see, the taking sort of showing kindness. So that animal, poor animal, also have some ability to know who's very sincere, who not very, in spite of Dalai Lama, not very sincere. So I think our daily conduct in every field, honest, truthful, I think very important.
But if I try to link that with what countries do, what governments do, and you said honesty, truthfulness, no hypocrisy. But when we look at globalization, if you look at the lack of coherence between the fact that rich countries do provide development assistance to poor countries, including this country, but then on the trade side, they keep trade barriers and they have subsidies on cotton, for example, which affects West Africa and other parts and Asia, or sugar by the European Union. So is that the kind of honesty and lack of hypocrisy in relations?
Here, one thing, of course, according to my little experience and observation, today's the reality of our planet, very much heavily interdependent. An economy, environment, and many fields. So I often is telling or expressing to public sort of talk, the concept of we and they, according new reality, no longer there. Entire world should be part of we. In ancient time, yes, isolated, and interest also exists because of the, quite independent. So at that time, the concept of we and they, very much sort of relevant. And with that, even warfare, destruction of other is victory of yourself. But now, today, the reality, every nation, every country, interdependent, interconnected. So one's own future, so that entirely depend on the rest of the world. The United States, biggest nation, most powerful economically. You see, your own sort of future depend on the rest of the world. So that's the reality. So therefore, treat other as a part of yourself. So here we need concept of oneness of humanity, world. And that I always talking. And we need sense of global responsibility. So long, in deep insight, I think the concept of we and they, and then some problems. And here I think the gap, the reality, and our perception. We still carry the century-old our perception. Our interest is something independent, something separate. So the reality, no longer that. This I feel.
Well, can I ask you, Your Holiness, how you apply this thinking about a oneness, about this incredible interconnectedness, interdependence, to the challenge of climate change, of global warming? And some of us are thinking about a concept of climate justice and equity, because a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions have come from lifestyles in this part of the world, affecting, and we do a lot of work in Africa, particularly African countries.
Yes.
And the whole continent of Africa is responsible for less than 4% of these greenhouse gas emissions, but they are badly affected. How do we evolve a fair, equitable way of addressing that?
That's unjust. Now here, I don't know. Of course, I don't know. I think instead of asking me, I think you should explain.
You're not supposed to say You're not supposed to say you don't know.
It is my freedom. And not only freedom, but also, you see, honestly. Yes. Although I have the name of Tamjay Khyamba, what do you call?
In Tibetan, one of the Tibetan titles refer to the Dalai Lama's all-knowing.
But that is just like a poem. The reality, my knowledge is very limited, like that. So here, firstly, there is a gap, rich and poor. That's also very, very serious, global level and also national level. Like United States, many occasions I'm expressing the richest country, yet some pocket, very poor people still remain there. And then the richer people, richer family, their lifestyle is much sort of luxurious and own, I think, several cars and several houses. Winter time go south, summertime go north, and also is touring in different countries. The poor people, even sometimes no house, very poor. And that is not only morally wrong, but practically also source of problem. The poorest section of people always some kind of feeling of frustration. The frustration transformed anger. Anger then transformed in action of violence. So very bad. So therefore, we have to think seriously how to reduce. Then, I think immediate possibility is the poorer section of the people, get them skills through education, and one most important, give them self-confidence. They also can be like other. One time in South Africa, in Soweto, I visited Soweto Township.
Yeah.
There, of course, some of you, I think, already know that story. But please don't feel boring because of repetition. But one important now person here, so I want to share with her. At that time, I very, very keen visit one ordinary family. Mm-hmm. Then finally, arranged by organizer. So then I sat, the member of the family, and we talked. And then their friend, Mr. Join, introduced as a teacher. The mother complained about education, her children. Then eventually, I took the sponsorship for 2 or 3 children of her. Her next few years, I sent some money like that. Then the person who introduced as a teacher, I talked now you, South African people, now you got democracy, equality, new constitution. So constitution provides equality. So wonderful. But at the same time, it may take psychological level. It may adjust sometime. Then he expressed to me, he believed native black African brain is inferior. And I shocked. And I argue. My own case was example. Now, of course, this is not a political statement, but actually, many Chinese is considered they're much sort of superior, and those minorities, they sometimes look a little bit. But when Tibetan get opportunity, at least those Tibetan refugee community in outside China, we prove we have some ability in education and various field. I mentioned to him, argue. Then finally, that person with size of relief. With size, then mentioned, now I believe we are same. Same potential. And also I notice in India, the people so-called low caste, they also use some kind of tendency of anger, frustration like that. Sometimes you see they express openly the upper class. Resentment. So in deep inside, again, this is some kind of feeling of inferior. So that must change. So that much depend our attitude, the upper class people's, more successful people's attitude towards them. Although helping, but look down, out of pity. That's mistake. You should respect them and serve them. That kind of spirit. So this is one thing. So the poorer section themselves, you see, they should have more self-confidence, like that. Then the richer side, I think your lifestyle, I think worthwhile, little change. And make available more money, less consume. Less consume. Then actually your own life becomes then more stable, more happier. And morally speaking also feel happy. If while some people, their life miserable, and you enjoy something, if person use real human feeling, it cannot go that way. While other people starving. Even some animal also have this sort of attitude. They want to share. Some bad dogs or bad cats, not doing that, but some you see do that, isn't it? So we are human beings. Suppose we are much intelligent person, intelligent sort of species of mammals. So inequality, while you are seeing, you are feeling, then still don't care. That kind of thing is, I think very bad, very unfortunate. So that I think long run, and that also I think through education. Media people also have, I think, important role, like that.
President Robinson, I know you're just about to ask a question, but I think we'll include all the audience. And so I'd like to ask you a question and then Your Holiness a question. Somebody in the audience has asked, in our current world, how do you explain to children that there's still goodness and hope for peace?
Good question. I would echo what the chair of the elders says to us, Desmond Tutu, as what essentially the elders should be trying to do, which is to find the good in everyone, and to find it particularly in children. But I think what His Holiness was saying struck me very much, because I got a book recently from a friend of mine in Ireland who works with very poor people, with homeless. She works for a small trust. Her name is Alice Leahy. She's a wonderful woman. And somebody said to her, don't you think you're wasting your time? Because what she was doing was just spending a lot of time with homeless people. And she produced this book called Wasting Time with People. And
Wasting time with people. No.
And I think we need to waste more time with children in the sense of parents being there. I'm a grandparent now. Being there to actually have those conversations, have those times to pass on what values are really about, what relationships are really about. And if we're rushing around and if we expect the school to do everything, not the home, then probably we won't make that connection enough with children, and we won't be able to, encourage them to see that their values are in relationships, in respect for others. And if I can put this in human rights terms, we have a wonderful convention called the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And it's wonderful because it goes that step further about children and says children must be active in knowing about and pursuing their own rights as children, which means they must respect the rights of others, of their parents, of those in school, of those in authority, but also of their peers, no bullying. And it's a bit sad that the United States is one of only 2 countries in the world that have not ratified that convention, the United States and Somalia. So maybe the Obama administration will change that.
And part of your power is that you work so practically in the real world. When children come to you and say, what can we do for our community? What are some of the practical suggestions you give them?
And children do come and say, and they also come now, I'm glad to say, to sessions of the United Nations that start with the voices of children that are very compelling. I come back to Eleanor Roosevelt. If human rights are to matter at all, they must matter in small places close to home, so small that you cannot find them on any maps of the world. And the way she said that would happen is it would take concerted citizen action. And that's why I'm very encouraged by the number of small organizations linking with other small organizations and becoming a sort of people power worldwide. You were talking about combating poverty. On the 17th of October, the Day Against Poverty, the organizations, including Oxfam, I'm honorary president of Oxfam, so I know this through Oxfam, the global call for action against poverty has been asking people to stand up against poverty on 24 hours a year. The first time, 23 million people registered that they were part of this stand up against poverty, and then it was 43 million. Last time it was 161 million people. And this is part of the connectedness that Your Holiness, that you've been speaking about. But it's also, I think it's also part of something that human rights people should have emphasized more. Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights actually captures what human rights should mean, but very often doesn't. It says, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And when I was listening to Your Holiness, you seem to be really emphasizing that dignity, the confidence of the poorest, the dignity of self. And I think we've talked too much about human rights in a rhetorical way and not actually talked about the reality of poverty where poor parents don't have medicine for a dying child. And then we look at the numbers. about 10 million children under 5 die every year of what we could prevent. Hunger, diarrhea, preventable disease, because they're not immunized. That would help greatly. So, I also believe in this, not we and they, but a one that we have to work on. And for me, that dignity is a very important component. I would love to hear your views, but we must listen to the other questions. But I would love to hear you speak about dignity and rights, and what dignity adds to the idea of human rights.
Dignity, sir. Yes, that's right, right. 그래서 저게 믿는 것 같아. 그 dignity에. I think right based on dignity. I usually look this way. We human beings, by nature, we have this sort of, by innate, firstly, as a living being, we have the experience of pains and pleasure. On that, by innate desire, achieve happiness, and desire to overcome suffering. That's there. So that's the basis of our right. Not based on work or position or richness or like that. No. Because by nature, everyone is a want happy life and do not want suffering. So that's the basis of our right. So that also, I think, from my viewpoint, that also, as a human being, the dignity is that.
So this is where the dignity of the person lies.
Then also, from that viewpoint, then other species of mammals also, it's the same sort of experience. And through that way, I think same right. But then compare with human being, I think we should have more dignity. I don't know.
I think you put it very well.
Your Holiness, one question from the audience, and I fear this may be the last question. What do you think about non-Tibetans visiting occupied Tibet? Is there an ethical dilemma?
그래서 visit?
Yes.
Oh, most welcome. It's really necessary now. Really necessary. Now last since the 79. Actually, my brother had a long meeting with late Deng Xiaoping. Since then, the sort of the contact or dialogue which is started. Then, and sometime in mid-90s, it ceased. Then again renewed since 2002. And then altogether, 8 rounds talk took place, but no result. Why? The main thing is the Chinese government is simply not admit there is problem. Tibetans are very happy. Only problem is just handful people from outside, and particularly Dalai Lama. Now they say Dalai Lama almost like a demon. So okay, no problem. I think it is quite okay. Demon always talking compassion. It's a nice demon. So the other day in San Francisco, I met one, this is my American friend. He asked me, why is the Chinese so afraid to Chinese government? So afraid. Afraid you. Why? He asked me. Then I just responded, because of my home. So the point is, since the Chinese government never admit, never acknowledge, there is problem. So now I think the world community has the responsibility to show world there is a problem. If there is no problem, as Chinese government say, the people, majority of the Tibetan people are very happy, then our information become wrong, then according these wrong information, we carrying this struggle, then we must apologize to the Chinese government. Really. If the people, majority of the people, are really unhappy and a lot of resentment there, then Chinese government, since they came to Tibet not as a colonialist, but rather liberator. So liberator must act as a liberator. So liberator should not bring more misery. So therefore, I think now only hope is, please, you, non-Tibetan, go there and ask Chinese government, you not only just you should step in Tibetan land, but you should have free access. You can argue with the Chinese government, or the you state, things are very beautiful, things are very good, then must show to the world. It is their interest and must prove Dalai Lama's claim is wrong. So you should ask the Chinese officials. Then on the spot, you should have free access. So not only welcome, but I urge you, please go there. And just sometimes I told, you say, I'm telling, rather I think expensive, go to Tibet. So then you can borrow some money from here and there. Then you bring some articles from Tibet, then you can sell. Then maybe you see you get some money.
Okay, I'm told we have 5 more minutes, so this is the last question. I'd like both of you to answer it. This member of our audience and our community says, I believe the human race is getting better spiritually over time. What do you think?
I'd like to answer that by remembering a question I was asked by the then president of China, Jiang Zemin, when I met him in Beijing on one of my visits. And I had to speak with him through translation. And when he asked this question, he then said to me in English, because he spoke more English than he was admitting, he said, I'm particularly interested in your answer. So I listened very carefully to the question. And the question he asked me was, do you, as UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, think that religion is important in the world today, given the advances in scientific knowledge? So I began the answer with the question, and I said, it is astounding, the advances in scientific knowledge. And it was just after the human genome had been mapped. But I said, if you're asking me as High Commissioner, I believe that religion and spirituality are extraordinarily important in our world today and will continue to be very important. And he did not like the answer. Not at all. He liked the beginning of the answer, but not the end of the answer. So.
I think, firstly, Of course, my answer always long. I'm not expert, you see. Answer yes, no, that. Right, simple answer. One, you see, my story. 1996, I had meeting late Queen Mother. Since she observed whole century, isn't it?
That's right.
And at that time, her age also 96. So I asked her, since you observe most part of the century, so do you think the humanity or world become better or worse or same? Without hesitation, she immediately mentioned better. Reason, she used, when she was young, there is no idea of human right and right of self-determination. Now these things become universal. So she mentioned like that. So therefore, and then also the spirituality way. Spirituality. I always feel 20th century, I think the most crucial century in human history. So the early part of 20th century, a lot of warfare, millions of people killed. World War or Civil War or Korean, Vietnam War, like that. Then I think the people generally really develop strong feeling of fed up about violence. So desire for peace, I think, much sort of stronger. And also, at least in the European continent, I think different nation, different nationality, they don't much bother about the difference. One time, you see, my tutor, I consider my tutor, von Weizsäcker, late von Weizsäcker.
I knew him, yes.
He once told me, when he was young, then every German eye, French is their enemy. And in French, I also same. But then he says, now, no longer that kind of a feeling. And hopefully, in Irish eye, the British are maybe now nicer. So these are, I think, through our own experience, I say, more hatred, more anger, more violence, nowhere to reach, more suffering, particularly innocent people. So therefore, I think a desire for peace, and when real desire of peace or desire of non-violence, sometimes I feel word peace and non-violence, a little bit is the same meaning, but seems to see non-violence is more stronger, I feel. The reason, when I first visit Soviet Union, 1979, then they say, peace-loving nation. All their military preparation for world peace. But I think, you see, they may find it difficult to say all the military preparation for non-violence. I think difficult. So therefore, I think the people's sort of public attraction about non-violence also growing. Now in South Africa, follow Mahatma Gandhi's sort of practice, and then Martin Luther King here in this country also strictly following Mahatma Gandhi's sort of principle. So that automatically you see bring spirit of dialogue and ready to talk with so-called your enemy. Talk how to solve this through mutual interest.
And also,
that's a practical way.
Yeah, also the women's movement, and women for peace, and women tackling violence.
here,
Don't leave that out.
now here, you see. I think appropriate to repeat one my sort of what say Kasoda, my idea. Since now recent years, in my public talk, I sort of mentioning, if I state, you see, that in front of one lady, people may see something.
Maybe seen as a kind of a flattery.
But the fact is, in human history, in early period, no idea of leadership. All member equal. I think at that time, some root or some fruit and some hunting, through hunting, some animal, equally share, work together, sharing together. No idea of leadership. Then gradually population increase. Then at that time, no rule of education. So physical strength, in order to become a leader, the physical strength is the key factor, like other animals. Therefore, the male dominance then start. Then eventually education develop. So then education bring more equality. Now today, generally speaking, of course, there are many parts of the world still because of the poverty and because of the education, these things still they're backward. But overall, I think education quite enough, quite advanced. But a lot of problem. So therefore, now time is come. We emphasize the importance of loving kindness or affection, compassion. Now, compassion is concerned because of a biological factor. Female, more sort of potential. And indication when other people facing suffering, the sensitivity about others' pain, I think female, more stronger. Obviously, in world history, those heroes, actually, in a way, these are murderers. So most of the heroes are male. Maybe few female become hero. In the sense of battle, killing. I think most cases.
We had at least one Irish one, Queen Maeve.
So therefore, now, because now new time, the necessity, more emphasis on compassion, warm-heartedness, rather than simply education. So women now should take a more active role regarding promotion of compassion. So that I always, that is often you see telling you see people. So, because other women, so therefore, the women movement, some feminists, a little bit too extreme. They even want, you see, Buddha, male pity should be female. And Jesus Christ also should be female. That I think a little bit extreme. But I truly, you see, feel if the leaders of this planet, I think, take female more, maybe safer. I feel like that. But I don't know.
Could I just actually build on what you've just said and say, I'm very pleased that there is a new kind of women's leadership, which is connecting women who have access to power or influence because of the positions they hold or did hold, who are linking with women who are suffering in poverty in places like Darfur and Chad. And there's a big connection, and it's exactly what you've said, that kind of empathy and compassion and using leadership to try to change. So I'm delighted that you recognize that. And
Thank you.
I just want to thank you both for such inspiring words and such human counsel, and I think Rinchen Dalai, the president of the Tibet Fund, is going to share some words with us.
Your Holiness, and President Robinson, on behalf of the board, directors of the Tibet Fund, and everyone gathered here this morning, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your wealth of wisdom about what we as members of the global community can do to help solve the difficult and urgent issues that are threatening our world today. You have shown us that the most effective solution to our problems, and in fact the source of happiness, is to care for others and uphold the values of truth and justice in our lives. We all will live here with a renewed sense of hope and understanding that each of us can make a positive difference in the world. I would like to thank Pico and Tubten Jimbala for their valuable contribution to today's dialogue. I would also like to thank our sponsors for their generous support and all of those who have worked very hard to organize this event, including our volunteers, staff, and the board. Many of you in the audience are long-cherished friends and donors of the Tibet Fund. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of you who have generously supported us over the last so many years through sponsorship of children, monks, nuns, and elders, and major projects that have improved the quality of life in the refugee settlements and contributed to our self-sufficiency. Your support is an expression of your solidarity with His Holiness the Dalai Lama's noble wishes for preserving Tibetan language, culture, and national identity, which is very much threatened in our own country. I thank you on behalf of our beneficiaries and hope that you will continue. Once again, thank you, Your Holiness, President Robinson, Pico, Tubten Jimbala, and all of you. Thank you.
Dalai. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Holiness.
Oh. So. Okay. Take it home. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.